be part of next presentation on leveraging technology on the part to digital resilience. Mr. Chris, please come on the stage and then I'll make the about you. Chris is part of the pre-sales team which is responsible for providing in-depth technical project expertise to new and existing clients. This includes teammate product demonstrations, product recommendations, POCs, and solution option to help customers deliver value in audit management and data analysis. Chris has 22 years of experience in the financial technology and data analytics industry prior to joining Teammate in 2021. He has held various customer-facing and product-related roles at Thomson Reuters and Bamboo. He holds a Bachelor of Science major in Business Management from De La Salle University, Manila, and a Master of Business Administration from the University of Manchester. It's all over to you, Chris.
Thank you for the warm introduction. So it's very great to be here, right? So everybody's here face to face, not wearing any masks. Makes a lot of difference, right? So probably I'm the only Filipino here. I'm based in Singapore. But yes, I can feel the energy around the room. It's really, really great to be here. Thank you for having me here. Okay. All right. So my objective today, right, is based on our experiences in talking with our customers, our partners. So my goal is basically to give you an understanding of the significant areas in internal audit that can help you build digital resilience, right? All right, so the key areas that I'm going to be talking about would be basically here. You can see continuous risk assessment. The next one would be agile audit. The third one would be data analytics. And finally, automated reporting. I think a lot of our peers have talked about all the different technologies like AI, right? So this is not generated by ChatGPT. I did the presentation myself. So basically, the key thing we need to remember, right, when we talk about digital technologies is first to get the basics right. Okay? You cannot just move from Excel to AI. There is no way you can do that, right? So it's a gradual step on your digital transformation journey. So I'm going to outline to you some of the steps on how you can do that. Okay. Right? So as you can see, right, I have a snapshot of the different risks from the World Economic Forum. So pre-pandemic, we didn't really think about changing the way we work. So we're so used to sitting in the same office, going to different locations to our customers, right, to our auditees, right? So, but there was a shift in circumstances. So it's basically changing the way we work, digital disruption. So it makes it very difficult to be with each other. So even in Singapore, right? So from point to point, the island is so small that it only takes 30 minutes for you to go around, right, by car to see customers. And yet, it's so they're so used to doing all the meetings digitally. So even if in Singapore itself, I cannot go for a face-to-face meeting. They still prefer Teams meeting or Google. Yeah. So you can see the challenges. People are so used to working in this way that it's really very difficult to change the mindset again, right? So as you can see, right, if you can read I'm not really sure if you can read the top 10 risks, but the world is facing a set of risks that are quite familiar again, right? So if you can see, is there mention of COVID? Nothing, right? So without even thinking, you can just imagine what the risk landscape looked like in 2020, in 2021, 2022, right? So the risk of a pandemic has been the top 3 concern or risk for the World Economic Forum, but it wasn't even mentioned here. All of us are back, everybody's not wearing masks. So everything's great, right? So in today's session, we'll explore the internal audit technology solutions that will help shock-proof your internal audit teams. So using those different areas that I mentioned earlier. Okay. One first would be, yeah. So talking to some people like who drop by the booth, right? A lot of internal audit teams currently use, not just in India, mind you, even in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, a lot of internal audit teams basically use Excel, SharePoint, right? So they're very early in their digital journey, so it's very, very basic technology. But what do you mean by audit management system? So what it does is it essentially helps you automate the audit management workflow, right? So you have your risk assessment, your audit planning, and your audit field work, or where you document your tests. You have the audit reporting, wrap up, and follow up, which is more important, follow up. So that's why I highlighted all those key features because, for example, especially follow up, right? You can just imagine following up on your auditees using email. You think they're gonna respond? It's difficult, right? You have to keep looking for the email, the last email, respond to that, and expect the email to come in, which rarely happens. So what you need is basically an entire audit management system to manage your workflow, including notifications. So you have automated notifications and change in the state. For each of the job, you have a state, right? So that you can monitor. And most of all, it's not just about workflow, right? When you talk about audit management system, it's more of generating insights. So for CAEs or audit managers, it's very important to keep track of the audits as they are happening. Yeah? So generating basically how much time is spent on the audit, what percentage has been done at this point in time. So the more you enter the information into your audit management system, the easier it is to generate those reports, which I'm going to show you later using the automated reporting. Okay? Right. So now we dig a bit deeper into the key areas. So the first one would be continuous risk assessment. So it's basically connecting different systems to your audit management system. So a lot of you have asked me this question, right? So can I connect my SAP system? Can I connect my HR system? Yes, you can. So it actually helps you make decisions based on real-time or near real-time data. Okay? So in this way, for assurance system, for example, you have your risk controls, your audit findings or issues, which you can get, push and pull into your audit management system, as well as your audit schedule. And for your KPI and KRI, for risk-related systems, we can see, right, you can look at the retention rates, or anything that's of importance from the different functions like finance, HR. Okay? And most of all, you have the ability to generate the data, not just within Excel. So you have the ability to generate dashboards, reports in Power BI or Tableau. Okay? Right. So how do you move from a traditional risk assessment cycle to continuous risk assessment? So in a traditional cycle, right, it would take around 15 months. So from the risk assessment up to the start of execution, it would be like 3 months. And then executing the whole plan would be like another 12 months. So it's like a 15-month cycle. So the main problem with that is the risks may have changed, right? So nobody could have predicted COVID in 2019, right? So it wasn't part of any probably risk assessment. So you can see that the more you're on top of risks, the more you can react to it, right? To make your team more resilient. Okay? So that is the annual risk assessment, which is 15 months. And the next step would be a quarterly risk assessment approach. So when you say quarterly, right, you have continuous risk self-assessments from your business contacts or your auditees, right? Which feeds into your plan. And then you have APIs that allow you, like with what you talked about earlier, to put the information into your audit management system to allow you to score the risks. Okay? But what's the ideal situation, right? So in the future, this is something that would be much more helpful for you, which is what we call the dynamic or continuous risk assessment, which includes monthly financials or other metrics that can be sent via an API. And then you have what you call the post-audit risk update. So after the end of every audit project, right, you can, based on the knowledge gained by the auditors or like their feedback, you can adjust the risk scores accordingly. Yeah, so that is key, right? So regular risk updates, and then that would be helpful in the scoring. Okay. So the next one we move is to agile audit. So basically, if anybody is in the IT space, right? So I used to be in a project management role, so as a in a fintech, right? So we used to have what we call our sprints. You have your daily stand-up where you update everybody in the team on what's happening, what you're gonna do, right? What you're doing, what have you done last week, what are you going to do this week? So you have the regular updates for 15 minutes for the whole team, nothing more than that. And then you have a Scrum Master who manages the entire process. And after the end of the sprint, you have a sprint review. So what we found out is that it's not just for IT teams, right? So you can apply this to the internal audit function as well, okay? So how you do that is basically a change in what you call the new ways of working. So it's a change in mindset, for example. You need to want to provide regular updates to your team, okay? So it's very important to have that. There's also a change in the process. So rather than doing it a task in phases, you break it down into smaller chunks. Okay, that's the most important thing. And of course, people. So you also have, you involve your auditees, you have the project, the audit project owner, then you should have more or less the same concept that you have for the IT, like Scrum team, right? Okay, so how it looks like in a stage-gated or a ad hoc one. So there's less communication. There's only update at the end of a certain phase, right? So the green ones would be the feedback, right? The green diamond would represent the feedback. So what would be the ideal state for agile audit? So you can see here that you have regular updates. So it's a share as you go, right? So in the two things that you need to remember from Agile Audit. One is Scrum, where you focus on continuous experimentation and feedback loops. And the other one is the Kanban board, where you have the stories and you move around as you update the whole team, right? So that's the key thing to remember on the Agile Audit. And this is the exact steps that you would have to take, all right? So sharing as you go, and not at the end. So basically, you break down the work into sprints. So it would be typically 2-week sprints. Yeah, same as the IT teams. So you start to plan as a team, right? So basically, you do sprint planning? So you prioritize the different stories or tasks. And then during the sprint, you have the daily stand-up as well. Okay? So which involves the audit delivery team. And that is where you update everybody in the team, like, what have I done? What am I going to do? What do I need to do? Yeah? And then at the end of the sprint, you have your sprint review. So the audit delivery team, your auditees, your audit managers, then discuss your findings and give your input. And finally, you have the debrief, right? So just within the audit delivery team, you have what you call the retro or the retrospective, where you can discuss ways to make audit better. Okay? Yeah, so this doesn't, the key thing to remember is it doesn't only apply to IT, right? It applies to any process, any function. So this is how you, based on our research, this is how you would actually apply agile audit to, to the IA function. Okay. So the next one is data analytics. So we've listened to a lot of talks about data analytics, right? So currently, most teams use Excel, Power BI, and of course, the more advanced teams would use like the traditional audit really specific tools like IDEA or Wolters, right? So essentially, what you would want to have is everybody in the team should be able to do their own data analysis, right? You don't want your auditors to study Python or R. They wouldn't really have time for that, right? And it's not their job. And you also do not want to be dependent on your data scientists. So essentially the key concept here is you want to have something that every auditor can use. Okay? So some of it, like you have to have a continuous test, right? So this is very important as well for greater efficiency. So it also feeds back to your risk assessment, right? So you have what you call continuous testing. So typically you have individual tests, but how would you actually create workflows out of those tests so that you can schedule them to run at specific times? Okay? So this is how you would actually do it. So you would have a data source, and then you can connect all your different tests together to call it a workflow. And once you've set up your workflow, then you can automate it to run at a scheduled time. So it can be weekly, like on a Friday, for example, you can specify it, monthly. So those reports can easily be generated. Yeah. And finally, we have what you call the automated reporting. So those grids and dashboards that you have, right? So it actually helps you provide the insights based on the information that you put into your audit management system. So it's like any data science, like garbage in, garbage out. So the more accurate the information, the more detailed the information is inside the audit management system, the more useful the reports would be, right? So it's not only limited to Excel. You have, of course, reporting APIs, which can help you connect to Power BI and Tableau, all right? Then this is an example output, right? So integrated reports and dashboards. So meaning it's integrated to your audit management system. So like I said, right, it's very important for audit managers to keep abreast of all what's happening within the audit. Like as you can see, you can create dashboard like how many issues, for example, are pending. What's the state you can slice and dice the information you need once you have the data into an audit management system. Okay? So putting it all together, right? So my conclusion, so basically combining these four elements can drastically change how internal audit teams work and make them more resilient. So all these key functions, key areas actually provide or linked to each other to provide information to help you be more resilient and shock-proof, right? So I'd like to answer any questions, but I think you feel free to drop by the booth. Vinod and I would be happy to answer any of your questions that you have. So thank you very much. It's great to be here. Yeah, no problem. Is there any question from anybody here?
Just one question around your experience with organizations who have already moved from traditional auditing to agile auditing, if any, and what is that one lesson that you would suggest to organizations who are planning to implement agile auditing?
All right, that's a great question. Like agile audit is like something new, right? Even in Singapore, right? So it's something that's driven by management as well, right? So they probably heard about it somewhere. Then they just like push it to the team. Oh, you have to do agile audit. So then everything has to start from a mindset, right? If you like, I'm gonna share my experience to be honest. Like when I was doing those daily stand-ups, right? So you're probably sick and tired. Like, what do I tell my team if you have nothing to do, right? Nothing to say. So it's like, I don't want to do this daily stand-up myself. So it's basically you have to have a change in mindset. That's the most important thing. Process can be learned. People are there. It's always the mindset that you want to do this in an agile way, right? So you have to be willing to share. It's about being willing to share your experiences, your feedback, honestly, to your team during the daily stand-up. I think that would be the most important takeaway from my experience.
Sure, thank you. That helps. Thank you again.
Any other questions?
Thanks for the presentation. You are referring people are moving from Excel to this phase. Can you suggest what are the baby steps we have to take, as most of us use the Excel? So
All right, okay. That's actually a great question, right? So if you're beginning your data analytics journey, right, you're starting with Excel, correct? So it's basically you have to perfect the tests, the individual tests. You cannot create a workflow if you don't even have the right individual test that you need to do, right? So it's a matter of like sitting down as a team, working on the test to make sure the output is what you expect before you can even think about automating it. Because when you automate something, you have to explain to the consultant, like, we want to automate this particular test. But then you have to have the tests right. So you need, first of all, you need to have the data. Most important is you need to have the data right. Because if you get data, for example, from a third-party system, the problem with it sometimes is the formatting, right? You need to spend a lot of time cleaning the data. So, for example, like the text numbers, the dates are saved as text, are exported as text. So it's about cleaning the data first, which probably 80% of the time you have to spend on perfecting the individual tests and then come up with a workflow. So there are different tools, like all of these different tools you can use to automate the workflows. So it's just a matter of getting the individual tests right first. I think one last question. Yeah, at the back, please.
Hi, you were talking about the shift from risk assessment to the 15-month cycle of audits to continuous assessment of risk.
Correct.
So here we are used to a pattern of audit where we first do the risk assessment, identify the areas for audit, and we have an audit plan, and we go about what are the areas that I audit and how I audit and when I audit it.
Correct.
But in the process of continuous assessment of risk, so if I keep doing it throughout, how do I finalize what's my audit scope? How do I finalize what is my timeline?
So that would feed into the next plan, right? So basically, you keep on updating your risk, so that will fit into the next plan. Because it's like a cycle, right? You're moving in cycles. So currently, it's like 15 months. So by the time you start after 3 months, you're already delayed, right? So that will feed into the next audit. Normally, that's why you keep updating it, so that it's the risks are more relevant. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So it's basically like moving. It's like a moving cycle.
So, but I anyway do that in the next cycle, right? So the first 15 months I identify certain risks,
Correct.
but then I come back to it after 15 months. I do anyway again do a risk assessment. But if I do it continuously, so suppose I've already completed the audit and I find something new, so I go back to the audit and redo it.
Okay. So basically, that's the thing, right? So because you have an audit plan in place already, right? So it's basically taking note of the change in the risks, right? So what you have it is like you have to do it after. So it's not like you can just change anything unless there's really significant. It depends on how you treat your risks, correct? So what you're gonna do once the risks have changed. So would you just leave it aside or just ignore, or you can reprioritize, right? So you can you can change your audit plan incrementally. Probably not the next year, probably next quarter, for example. You can change that one before you can. It's possible. Feel free to drop by the booth. We can talk a bit. I can show you an example if it's much better.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Actually, what you will do here is we are talking about an agile model where your entire audit cycle should be nimble enough to accommodate for any risk assessment results that you believe is significant and that will be determined to the objective of the organization. So if that happens, your audit cycle should be able to facilitate the consumption of that additional control evaluation. And that's precisely why we are talking about leveraging analytics and automation and agile process, right? That's precisely the objective of even doing a continuous control monitoring exercise. So if you're not able to absorb that risk assessment outcome and translate into a continuous control monitoring, then the objective is not met. So your question, the simple answer is, when you do this continuous control monitoring exercise, evaluate the outcome of the risk assessment and understand what's the significance of the assessment outcome is. And then you involve your stakeholders, understand the priority and agree on what makes sense, and should you be reprioritizing some of your current audit cycle to accommodate the risk assessment that you've done, or would you be in a position to wait for the next cycle, which is, as he said, it could be the next quarter or next year, whatever the cycle. It all depends upon the significance of the risk. Yeah?
Thank you. That's correct.
So just to add to that, so that's why we brought the Agile Audit in 2021. And this particular Agile Audit module, it's, what does it help us? Like it constantly you can create sprints and storyboards where you will identify the blockers. So the blockers is where you will come to know what are the real changes happening and if you want to address it or not, or if you're pushing it later or pushing it to the next year, all these things will be done, and it reduces the timeline. Basically, Agile process really helps to reduce the timeline. So instead of going for 9 months audit, the cycle might reduce to 5 months depending on the number of sprints you're cutting short.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much. We can drop by the booth. I think
Hi, Chris. Thank you for the presentation. Just one question. Have you come across any organization using the tool, basically any audit management tool for the sampling piece? Because sampling haphazardly I can understand, but it's a very subjective topic. So have you ever come across the organizations making use of the audit management tool for the sampling?
sampling techniques. You're talking about sampling methods, right?
Yes, yes.
Feel free to drop by the booth.
Sure,
I
sure.
can talk about it here, but
Yeah,
feel
no
free to drop by
problem.
the booth. Thank you.
Yes, will work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, sir.